The ACC is college football's sleeping giant, and it just might not wake up. Now, the ACC is a country spanning, weird college sports conference that includes teams from California to Texas to Florida to Indiana to Massachusetts, but it hasn't always been that way. In the beginning, it was an Atlantic Coast Conference, as the name would suggest. It was Maryland, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and eventually Virginia. And it was just kind of centered around the mid-Atlantic with a few schools that really focused on academics and basketball when they really got going. But as we know, college football is the true decision maker in college sports. So we pick our story up in 1991 when Florida State decides to leave the Metro Conference and independent status in football and join the ACC as a full-fledged member starting in 1992. And that immediately pushes the ACC to the top of the college football conference heap, because between the time that they joined in 92 and the year 2000, Florida State went to 5 national championship games, winning 2 of them and staking their claim as one of the most dominant teams in the 90s. And then in 2004, another team with their name in the running for the best team in the 90s decides to join the ACC from the Big East when Miami, as well as Virginia Tech, leave their former conference to join the ACC. So at the beginning of the 2004 season, the ACC includes teams that have been in 9 of the last 12 national championships and have won 3 of those national championships. So then why did it take 9 years for them to get back there? It has to start with Miami. I don't think that it can be overstated how big of a get it was for the ACC to pull Miami from the Big East and how big of a loss it would be for the Big East, because Miami was probably the most dominant team in the 80s, one of the best teams in the 90s, and started off the 2000s with a great amount of success. And they started off in the ACC with a good amount of success as well. They finished ranked in the first 2 seasons they were in the conference. But between 2006 and 2013, they only had 1 season in which they had more than 7 wins. And I was trying to kind of figure out why that was. Like there was some kind of controversy or something like that. And there really wasn't a reason that you could point to for why they didn't have that same level of success. Maybe you could say that they just weren't ready for the competition in the ACC. Maybe you could say that they had just kind of worn out their welcome. They lost a couple of their good coaches that really were able to take Miami to what they should have been, or whatever it was. But actually, they should have been better than they were, because from 2002 to 2010, Nevin Shapiro admitted to paying players for Miami and having a bunch of recruiting violations that didn't result in anything good. Those years didn't result in anything good. That was after they were good. So maybe he just admitted to being from 2002 to 2010 so they wouldn't have to vacate any of their wins from their good era. But why would they not be better than they were during that time? And unfortunately for the conference, this was a bit of a downturn for Florida State as well, because when they joined the conference, they won 12 of the first 14 conference championships, including the first 9 after they joined in 92. And then they went from 2005 to 2012 before they won another one. Now, for Florida State, it's a bit more explainable because Bobby Bowden was getting into his late 70s. And this was a time when we had Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno dragging around on the sidelines at the same time. They did not know when to let go at this point in college football. Thank God for Nick Saban stepping away, and maybe it wasn't really his choice because he wasn't going to win in the NIL like he was before, but thank God he understood that it was time to get away before he was dying on the sidelines like Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno. Now, so that leaves a gap in which some other team needed to step up, and the conference just could not produce that team. It probably was Virginia Tech that was the strongest brand and the strongest team for them during that period, but they only finished in the top 10 twice. That was in 2007 and in 2010, and both of those times they finished 10th. In 2007, Boston College finished 9th, but that was their highest ranking in the final AP poll for 7 years between 2005 and 2012. Now, of course, that is then closed off by Florida State winning the final BCS National Championship in 2013 behind Jimbo Fisher and Jameis Winston. And then, of course, the Clemson dynasty comes in, winning 2 national championships in this 4-team CFP era and going to 4 different national championship games during that time. And that's probably the golden age for modern ACC college football. Florida State in the 90s probably has some kind of argument for that as well, but really, Florida State followed up by those Clemson national championship games. That time period where they have two different teams winning national championships in the span of about 6 seasons is really the golden age for ACC college football. And then once Clemson starts to go away following that 2020 season in which they lose, 2019 season in which they lose the 2020 CFP national championship to Joe Burrow and LSU, then it really starts these dark days that we're currently in for the ACC. And I think there's a few things that the conference did in the early 2010s that could project out their eventual demise in the 2020s on the football side of things. Pitt, Syracuse, and Louisville being added when the Big East collapsed in 2013, 2014 really has not panned out in the way that they wanted to on the football side. Of course, Louisville won a national championship, I think the first year in the ACC or the last year in the Big East. I'm not exactly sure for basketball, but football, they have not performed the way that they needed to, especially I think Louisville. That's probably the program that they were expecting the most out of from the football side, and it just really hasn't happened on a national level for Louisville in the ACC. I don't think that the expectation should have been that Louisville would do that. They are not the size of program that wins national championships, especially if they have to go through a power conference schedule. I personally think that Louisville was best off in Conference USA. They would have been a dominant program a la probably Boise State, maybe in both football and basketball if they would have stayed in Conference USA instead of jumping to the Big East. But especially in the ACC, they just do not have the funding to compete with the top programs in the conference. And the top programs in the conference aren't doing it at a consistent level nationally, so it makes Louisville not fill the shoes that they need to fill for the ACC. Another part of this move when they brought these teams over for the Big East was bringing Notre Dame over and allowing them to stay as a non-football member. Notre Dame has been somewhat successful in basketball during that time. They've had some big runs in the ACC tournament, and they've even done some things in March Madness. But allowing them to have this kind of alliance schedule where they play 5 ACC teams every season instead of being a part of the conference has really hurt the conference. I think they don't get the cachet of having Notre Dame in there as a football team. They do not get that. They do not get what they should get for having Notre Dame in their conference because Notre Dame is an independent team. Notre Dame still has to schedule all of these teams like Stanford, USC, Army, Navy, Purdue, Michigan, whoever else they want to schedule. And those teams get more cachet for being aligned with Notre Dame than the ACC does. Even this year, when Miami beat Notre Dame in the beginning of the season, Notre Dame does not get punished the same way that another team would get punished for losing that game, and Miami is not going to get the clout. Now, Miami has done its own thing to ruin that because they lost games that they should not have lost. But again, the ACC is not getting the clout for having Notre Dame that they should have because they did not force them to be a football member if they wanted to join their conference in the other sports. And the biggest part of that move was when those teams joined the ACC in 2014, they all signed a grant of rights agreement that ran through 2026, 2027. So this was signed over 10 years ago at this point, and it still is currently in effect. And then it was extended when they had a new 20-year deal with ESPN through 2035, 2036. So for another 10 years, these schools are tied together, and they've added more schools onto that. So we have this massive bloated conference with now Cal, Stanford, and SMU joining in 2024. So we now have this bloated conference from California to New York to Florida, Texas, and everything in between, it seems like, all tied together through 2035, 26, and have these crazy damning exit fees that will keep these teams tied together in a conference that just does not make sense in any sport. And I really think that you can point to 2023, Jordan Travis's injury at the end of the season for Florida State that kept them out of the 4-team playoff as the death knell for this conference. I think that that is where you can point to and say, this is when the ACC college football died. Because again, Florida State, for Clemson, for Miami, for whoever, Florida State is the leader of this conference. They have to be. That's what they were meant to be when they came in 91. That's the role that they performed in the 90s. That's the role that they performed in the early 2000s. And they reinvigorated the conference when they won the national championship in 2013. Miami has not lived up to its side of the bargain. Clemson was gravy for the conference, but they should not be and probably will not be a team that can lead a conference in modern college football just because of the spending requirements that need to be had for this level of college football at this time. Florida State is the team in the school and the program that can fill that role. And 2023 killed Florida State. I don't know how you get it back together. I don't think that you get it back together with Mike Norvell, although it seems like he's going to be there. They have not fired him yet, and all the good coaches are starting to take jobs. So looks like Mark Norvell is going to be there for another season. I don't know how you reinvigorate that program with what has happened. With that crazy, crazy decision by the CFP to put Alabama in over Florida State. They then go and absolutely get their ass kicked by Georgia, understandably so, but then they don't come back the next season any stronger. They go 2-10 in the following season. And then it looks like they're back at the beginning of this season when they beat Alabama, but they have gone 2 straight seasons not making a bowl after they finished 5-7 this season, and really all they've done is kind of put a damper on Alabama's season that probably is going to turn out just fine for Alabama, and didn't really turn that into anything for themselves. So what is Florida State in modern college football? How do you get back to that top level that really you were only at it one season with Mike Norvell? How do you put that all back together for a program that absolutely needs to lead this conference on the football side? Because nobody else in this conference is going to take that lead. Of course, when they added Miami, that was the idea of the role for them, is that them and Florida State would be able to lead the conference either in the same season or trading offense seasons. But Miami has not lived up to that, not through the entire time that they've been in the conference. And they've kind of been flirting with the idea with Mario Cristobal over the past 2 seasons, but they've proven to not be able to be reliable because they're going to lose games they shouldn't lose because Mario Cristobal does not know how to coach a disciplined team. All he knows how to do is scream at kids on the sidelines instead of actually getting them to play the way they need to play in the games they need to win. Mario Cristobal did this at Oregon. I watched it firsthand. He's doing it again at Miami. This is not the guy that's going to lead a program that can lead a conference that needs to get their shit together in the 2020s if they want to hold anything together with the crazy alignment they have locked in through 2036. And if it's not Miami or Florida State, who is it? Can Clemson do it? I don't think that they can. Is Virginia Tech or Virginia going to do it for them? Maybe Virginia finds their way into the college football playoff this season, but does that mean that you think that a team that just happens to jump in because they won a conference championship is going to be able to lead them into the promised land in the next 10 seasons? Do you think that SMU, because they won one conference championship and probably should have been in another one this season, is going to lead this conference to a national championship at some point, back to national prevalence? Do you think that they're going to be able to stave off the Big 12 after Texas Tech is proving to be a program that has to be reckoned with BYU proving they have to be a program that has to be reckoned with Utah probably staying relevant even after Kyle Whittingham leaves the conference? I don't think that the ACC has a team that has the stones and has the program makeup to be able to lead this conference to where it needs to be to stay relevant in the power conference conversation. And this is all exacerbated by the fact that they could not have the foresight that having 17 teams that are more or less equal in a lot of cases would cause a conference championship scenario in which Duke at 7-5 would get in over 4 other 6-2 teams, including your highest ranked team in the conference that's probably going to be stoned and held out of the college football playoff. And maybe your entire conference is going to be held out of the college football playoff because you didn't include the college football playoff rankings in your tiebreaker scenarios. You used, conference winning percentage by opponents as the deciding factor when you have 5 different teams at the same record. How can that possibly be the thing that makes the decision? I know the SEC has that. I know the Big Ten has that. But how can that possibly be the foresight for these conferences to make sure that they are in the college football playoff? For the SEC and the Big Ten, it doesn't matter. Both teams in the conference championship game every single season are going to be in the CFP. The ACC might just have found its way to not being in the college football playoff as a power conference when there's 12 teams in the college football playoff. Think about how bad it has gotten for the ACC and where do they go from here? Who is going to take them out of this darkness? If you can find a team in this conference, if you can find a program in this conference that's going to take them out of this darkness, please let me know, because I don't see it. But thanks for watching that video. Make sure that you like and subscribe and hype the video. It helps small content creators. I'm a small content creator and I could use all the help I can get. If you made it this far, leave a comment and let me know what you think. Is the ACC doomed for the rest of history, or is there some way that they can get it figured out here? And where do you think they really went wrong in their realignment story that made it so they would be in this situation in the 2020s and 2030s? If you want to watch more videos, I do have this for you. Over here, I've got my video that I did about Conference USA last week, the rise and fall of that conference. So go ahead and check that one out if you're interested in conference history. Up here, I've got one of my most popular videos, which is College Football in 2030, which we will be updating here soon. So check that one out if you haven't seen it yet. Other than that, I've got my subscribe link on this side here. And if you love Bucky Barracks and you can't get enough, I've got more Bucky Barracks right on top. We'll check you next time. See ya!